I got to speak with Jeff Weaver, who has known you for a long time. Last week I had an interview with him, and he said even 30 years ago you've always been very driven, very passionate. Where does that fire come from?
Hard to say. I mean, I'm not a psychoanalyst. I haven't psychoanalyzed myself. And it's hard for anybody to know what motivates them, to be honest with you. I think, frankly, though, a lot of it comes from growing up in a family that did not have a lot of money. And understanding what it means, to have a family that struggled economically, and what that meant to our family, and to know that many other families were then and are now in the same boat. And that's something that is very, very deep inside of me.
Yeah. I know you also, lost your mother at a young age.
Yeah, I did.
How did that impact your family?
Well, I lost my mom when I was 18. I lost my dad a couple of years later. So I was kind of out there on my own.
Yeah. Has that influenced your view on Medicare for All? Is that part of why that's such a central piece?
Well, I happen to think, not just for me or my family, but that it is barbaric that today we lose 30,000 people a year. We don't talk about it, and this is part of what corporate media is about, and it's part of the power of the healthcare industry. A lot of people are hurting because of a dysfunctional healthcare system. And to me, I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. And somehow in Canada, they managed to have a system where everybody goes to the doctor you want, any doctor you want. You don't take out your wallet, no out-of-pocket expenses, no premiums, no co-payments, no deductibles, no nothing. You get sick, you end up in the hospital, you come out, there is no bill, people don't go bankrupt. So I sit there and I think, how come the Canadians can do it and spend half as much per person as we do on healthcare? Pay a fraction of what we pay for prescription drugs. And then I got angry at the greed of the healthcare industry that made $100 billion last year, while 87 million people are uninsured or underinsured. So I do believe that healthcare is a human right, and it pains me, because I see people, I go all over my own state, all over this country, and you see so many people hurting, and occasionally dying from the dysfunctionality of the current system.
I don't know if you've seen this reporting yet, but The Intercept has a new report up about how Kamala Harris, who was an early co-sponsor of your Medicare for All bill, was running Facebook ads, building her campaign list off of her support for that bill, and now she says that she's not comfortable with it. Why do you think that Senator Harris and others are backing away from the specific version of Medicare for All?
Probably better to ask Senator Harris, but I think at the end of the day, what this debate is about really has nothing to do with healthcare, honestly. This system is so dysfunctional. We're spending twice as much per capita as any other industrialized nation. So many uninsured, so many underinsured, such high costs for prescription drugs. What it is all about, and this is what the corruption of American politics and society is about. There's only one thing that this debate is about. Do we have the courage and the capability of taking on the healthcare industry that made $100 billion in profits last year, that over the last 20 or 30 years has spent billions of dollars on campaign contributions and on lobbying? That's what it's about. They have enormous wealth, enormous power. They have a lot of friends in the media. Do we have the strength to take them on and create a system that is humane and that works for all people? Not everybody is prepared to do that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you another healthcare-related issue. We're in the midst of the worst addiction crisis right now, perhaps in our nation's history.
And we're sitting in Kentucky here, where it is a very serious
problem. Ground zero, absolutely. Talk about your approach to the war on drugs. Your campaign's just released a comprehensive criminal justice reform. Some places like Seattle are piloting a program where they would decriminalize even hard drugs like heroin and are routing people instead of to prison to rehab. Is that something that you're interested in?
That's a movement in the right direction. Look, this is what we have to recognize. First of all, we have to ask the question, why is it that so many people are falling into drugs, into alcohol, and into despair? I mean, that's an issue over here. Why do people turn to drugs to ease?
And why do you think so?
Because I think there's a lot of pain in this country, and I think people are running away from that pain. And I think in rural parts of this country, if you have a job that pays you $9 an hour, if your kid can't afford to go to college, if you're living in a community which is depopulating, where there's not a whole lot of hope, not a whole lot of optimism, you get into a mindset which says the best that I can do is ease my pain. And then I become addicted to one thing or another. But that is an issue. I mean, the doctors call it diseases of despair. That's what it's called. I did a hearing as chairman of a subcommittee a few years ago called, it was called poverty as a death sentence. Poverty as a death sentence. There is a physiology of poverty. Did you know that? In other words, if you are living in poverty and you can't afford to pay your bills and you can't afford to go to healthcare, you develop a physical structure that deals with all of the stress that you have to deal with. And that's why we have massive gaps in life expectancy between wealthy communities and poor communities. You know, gaps of 15 to 20 years, because people living in poverty are living in terrible, terrible stress. So first thing that we have to do is give hope to people who in many cases have lost hope. And that means give them the educational opportunities they and their kids need, give them decent housing, give them health care, give them jobs that will allow them to be productive members of society and earn a decent income. I think when people have jobs and income, there is much less likelihood that they will turn to drugs and addiction.